with art and like how that works online and how I guess it works in the commercial sphere as well, like with commercial galleries and stuff nowadays as well. But it's just quite interesting that choice of like how you use that within digital context and within digital art.
I think it's. I thought I was really interested, like really wanted to get more into, because I think the more spheres that you can enter, even ones that like these sort of negative areas like advertising things, it's exciting to like see what you can do. But I found out quite quickly that you need like millions and millions of views to be able to get. I got like a little bit of makeup. I won a razor because I had a beard and things like that. But I didn't, it was quite hard. And I monetized, but then I noticed that more of my videos were getting watched by, I think, YouTube, and lots of them started to get removed. So I was just like, I can't cope with this.
And that's the thing, one important thing that shouldn't be forgotten, that all these platforms like YouTube, Facebook, they're private companies, so they're already based on monetization. And I think you said the very right. We're sort of contributors but consumers at the same time, and but even though we upload for free, it's actually not for free. It's a whole commercial process, and that's I think that's what I was saying before about this pregnancy tests that I get advertised to all the time. As I upload something, but then at the same time I get advertised something, and so it's this. I almost want to say a conflictual relationship where you're actually getting with art, even getting into this, getting out of this competition or being offered.
But that's what I was talking with my Life in Adverts project. That's the whole idea. That's what makes the web free. I mean, it's a commercial entity. Therefore, the fact we're getting it for free is based on something, and that's what it's based on. So we are obviously creating ever more precise profiles, which then drives the whole advertising machine. But basically,
I believe in freedom in art, and then art is true and honest. And I think a lot of sexually charged images in the presentation and a lot of erotics performed by artists which claim to be feminists. And I find this a little bit hypocritical in your presentation. I tell you why. I came from a surgical background and I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist.
Sorry,
I dedicated my many years of my life to fight for health and life and rights and injustice against women. I felt especially privileged to have opportunity to serve for the most poverty suffering and disadvantaged society both in Africa and in Europe. I perform variety of art from landscape, still life, abstraction, both male and female portraits, and figurative paintings, including male nudes. And this is, as my special interest developed by years of my lecturing in human anatomy. I was shocked and deeply disappointed when, despite my wide interest, my art was branded as a sexist because part of my art was associated with female portraits. This was explained to me by formally during assessment by my tutor. Another example was my essay where only once I used the word woman, for which I was severely reprimanded and with anger referred to read a book, I Love My Dick, for which I felt deeply uncomfortable, offended, gender discriminated, and suffered in silence for weeks, and to the extent that I completely lost interest in my future art education. This is not anymore about historical aspect of women in society. This is not about gender equality in our society. This is about, in my opinion, reverse gender discrimination directed not always towards the perfect target. If our desire is to build let me just finish this sentence because it's important. If our desire is to build fair and equal and respecting each other's society, this has to stop. My question is, I'm interested in triangle between art, artist, and viewer. Do you think if I will claim to be feminist, or if I will claim to be male gay, my life will be easier?
No.
Sorry, I was thinking this is very easily going to fall into that kind of reverse racism, reverse sexism argument, which I don't personally, I'm not really interested in engaging with. If anybody wants to, maybe afterwards,
then feel free. But sorry, that's not something I want to engage with. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question.
I had a couple of questions. One on the issue of personal safety and the other, but that kind of got answered. Well, we're discussing on the second on over-identification. First on personal safety, you were talking about making, becoming, from the artist or the author, becoming a profile. And I just wonder what your views are in a time where all our personal lives are up online and all our details are being controlled by private companies. What do you do, or how do you draw this line between your intimacy, what you think is your real intimacy, and what the world thinks is your intimacy because you are sharing it with everybody? And do you become a schizophrenic person in sharing all your intimate thoughts with the world, but then thinking actually that's not me, that's a public persona that I have created as an artist? Or are you the same person? And the second, I thought the first one is a personal safety thing, because I think it can create a lot of sense of anxiety, to know that everybody may be looking at you and laughing at you or not, and how to take that. Where do you draw the line with over the identification, as you were discussing? Because I think sometimes there's an issue that gets discussed a lot, which is to what extent, where does the responsibility of the artist start or end? To what extent you can just do something and then say, well, it's now up to the public to interpret what they want to interpret, and if you don't give some sort of context, does it make you complicit in a movement that may be dangerous? Yeah.
I think that's what I was trying to say before with this sort of what the online provides that maybe a context that the gallery space wouldn't, is sort of this cross-referencing, and then, for example, in doing the Charlie Chaplin speech, I go to Charlie Chaplin where it was obvious that, he was over-identifying with Hitler for this reason of mimetic exacerbation. And I agree, it's very dangerous, and actually I'm not exactly sure where the line lies. But I feel at the same time you have to push it and take a certain risk to really get where you want to get. I'm actually not sure also where to draw the line myself, because I think, like we were trying to say, there's sort of this point where it sort of can drop or flip where people just think, she's just a right-wing politician, or she wants to be part of this. Which in a way, curiously, I don't mind. I mean, it's more like, I think what I was trying to say also with the whole identification with Maréchal Le Pen, it looks innocent, and that's what the danger is, It's like, I assume I don't look like a dangerous person, but, I could have all these dangerous, I don't want to say faults, but it's about this as well. So, this awareness of, she could do that, for example. So I think that's why I quite like pushing this line and taking the risk that people may think, maybe she's just that.
I wonder if also operating on that line, this dangerous line, is exactly the moment where things collapse.
Mm-hmm.
So then that's up to the viewer in that way to make that kind of decision, which doesn't matter to you whether it's doing that or not, but it is actually presenting them with that dangerous moment, is the possibility of questioning, or that could all collapse for the viewer as well.
I think really the questioning everything that you come across on the internet thing, and the fact that one takes things at face value in a way that is quite surprising sometimes to me, that the more options there are, the more that opinions are being expressed, the more people are shut down to actually, are shut down to the actual, making decisions or deciding what's real or not. So that's why I'm really fascinated by being in areas where, it's not, I'm not, maybe it's at a different level. When I was, I don't know if I was suddenly a stand-up comedian or something, or it became and I was just it's maybe actually that's quite exciting, and that maybe I'm now in this, or I'm supplying somebody with their fetish material, or I'm doing, and those are all quite, I don't know, it's quite exciting, because those are the kind of questions that we should be having about everything that we come across. That's sort of, I was going to go really big, like the point of art is, like, but you should question. So I think that's, you know, when we come across stuff on the internet, that's what I wanted to do, is that you don't know where it stands. It's not in one specific camp. It's across all these things, and you're not sure, and maybe that's...
Yeah, I guess also...
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking that, you know, a lot of what we're talking about is kind of coming up against this question of the accidental audience, which is obvious, you know, that the internet being this kind of new public space in some sense, is that when we're putting things out there, we're quite possibly losing their context completely if they've been ripped from their source and, you know, and shared. And so there is this kind of encounter with an audience that may have not intended to see art in any way. And there's also a question of a kind of ethics of appropriation, of like, what is it okay, you know, how do we even kind of decide what's okay or not to appropriate and to then share? But somebody's got a question.
I just want to say you've all done a really great job. I really enjoyed listening to you kind of talking about how your work operates. I guess what I was really interested in, kind of drawing a little bit from what everyone said, was kind of the ability that new media kind of is self-autonomy, and the idea that on these platforms and social media or whatever, you have this ability to kind of not only control the image that you are kind of projecting to the world on some level, but it's the idea that it is definitely kind of LinkedIn representationism, and the idea that it's a contrived image, and then drawing on what you were saying about kind of blurring the lines between fantasy and reality, and you know, the perceived like truth of the image or whatever. I just wondered if you just kind of like say something about kind of the power and the autonomy that some of these new medias can give to people kind of working in this way, even if it's not necessarily always a kind of truthful image and a real representation of a person. This could be not as contrived, but...
So, I don't know, I thought that when Noah's when he talks about how the photography initially gave female artists a way to get away from this gallery market sort of thing, so you can operate in your own sphere. And I think that's maybe where I think that this kind of allows people to operate, so you're not operating towards anyone's means, although the advertisers maybe decided they're getting something from us for free, but you don't have to operate towards an end goal of any other, like a gallery or some sort of market. Obviously we need some money to survive and things, try and get money from advertisers or whatever, but yeah, I think maybe that's the exciting thing, is that you can actually create without needs. Like, I don't know, that's what you were saying with that.
I mean, at the same time, what feeds into that, I think also because you say, okay, we need some money, and because we have all these virtual profiles and entities, but at the same time, that also pushes, I think, the need of presence at the same time as well, because we have all these virtual profiles, but at the same time, you know, we're sitting here now, we're not looking at our virtual profiles, and so sort of there's an economy there as well that sort of goes against that technology. And another thing I wanted to say about this sort of empowerment of the digital space and viewers as well. We have to be careful of it in that sense, because it's private companies, and there's also a sort of censorship going on in a way, because it's not called censorship because they're not governments, because they're private companies, it's not called that, but
Not yet.
not yet.
It's sort of worse.
But so there's still this limit to creating this profile identity, like your picture being taken off that would like.
But I think it's quite exciting one, like what you can get away with on YouTube and things. I don't know, but that's like a different thing. You have to see where you can push it.
But I think also, I mean, I've brought it up very briefly, but Aisha Siddiqui, she was kind of arguing that on the one hand, of course, the internet has allowed for many identities and voices who traditionally weren't able to circulate images of themselves and to exchange images and be like, oh look, there's other people just like me. They might be on the other side of the world. But of course, and that creates community, that creates potential, and it also creates voices who weren't traditionally in the media to have a voice. And you know, if you look at Black Lives Matter, for example, but you know, she's also just kind of pointing out, as you're saying, that there is this. It's also a commercial platform, and who knows, like Tumblr could go down tomorrow, and then all of those potential relationships could also go as well. So it's the fact that we're always kind of working within these difficult places. It's not like it's all good or all bad, or you know, there's that tension between them. But you were asking something to do with the contrivance as well, isn't it?
I was thinking more, I think that's really right, Nick, I was trying to move away from the commercial into just kind of the images that people are kind of constantly kind of producing, and even people that aren't engaged with producing them in necessarily a fine art context. It's the nature of these images being within kind of, they are so constructed and so thought out, and but they with an aim to be seen as instantaneous or spontaneous, as you were saying. But I think so often they are so much more contrived, and they are kind of really thought of or whatever, and it's
again, there's this tension between
yeah,
the
this
mediated
false,
and the authentic,
yeah,
or the staging of authenticity.
and even the staging of authenticity and the staging of the contrived images still has to have and maintain an aesthetic of spontaneity. It can't, it can't look like you've been sat down and really working on it, because otherwise it loses that kind of relatability. And I think just thinking about the degree of kind of effort that goes into producing some of this work, whether you're doing that on a social media basis or as social media integrated on YouTube as part of your fine art practice, it's like I think it kind of follows the same lines, kind of blurring that boundary between fantasy and reality. But yeah, it was
Yeah, exactly what I was trying to say, but I wasn't saying it as well. But yeah, these construct. But I think it also comes down to being aware of when we come in contact with images, about how they've been presented, and actually analysing images more, which maybe is happening less the more images that we see. I sometimes find that. Maybe actually taking time with specific images, or with an image, is quite important.
And maybe there's this difficulty when there's like so many images. How in any way can you be authentic? And this tension between the individual and the collective, and the one and the many. I think it kind of feeds this sense of anxiety that why is your Instagram post any different than anybody else's, and they're all within the same format. And so of course these questions around like what is some kind of authentic self-expression, I think come up a lot. Also to do with the amount of images and their circulation.
I agree also with the whole idea of it being empowering and giving voice and sharing information, and people who are invisible becoming visible. I completely agree with that. But in general, the tone is, and it's been really interesting to listen to, but the tone's very, very positive. It's like a very positive feeling around circulating images and of oneself representation. Of kind of going along with what you were saying about those images and how they can be pretty detrimental to people, and how people get hooked on that validation. And then you, as an artist, kind of using it as a medium, so it's a different intention, but someone who may be using it really to get the validation and the likes and the comments, and not to analyse them in that way, and to kind of, receive like literally emotional fulfillment from that, and not having other ways. I don't know, it just feels like that's kind of been not mentioned so much, the kind of like flip side of that, and how that can be pretty negative on human relations and our relationships with ourselves, and like the schizophrenia you mentioned, and the kind of, lack of perspective of what's real and what's not, and definitely like the hook to being validated through online strangers, like fantasy people that they're people but we don't actually know them, we'll never see them, they're literally invisible people who like our comments or like our posts. I just think that side of it hasn't really been looked at, and I wonder what you think about the negativity within it existing at the same time as this kind of really positive voice.
Can I just say, normally my talks come across as so negative that maybe I try to tweak it in some way, because my argument was exactly that there, this kind of empowerment and agency, what is it really? What do those numbers mean? How does that improve the status of women in society just because a shower image circulates? I guess I thought it was kind of obvious that rhetorically, well, no, that's not. There's also extreme negativity in there, in the sense of reinforcing the idea that that's the only agency that women have, and that's of course a very dangerous thing. So it's I think what you bring up is right. Yeah.
And I think the shame thing and using your own body is completely mad on the internet. The way what has happened with the idea, with the human body and how it's seen, and how people. It's the thing where you're driven more and more to be validated through nudity or whatever, sort of. And then at the same time, that's just so you can be shamed at the other end. So yeah, it's completely, every aspect that has this, as you're saying, has this sort of great side, having those that has their completely detrimental side. But I find that I can't personally operate in these kind of systems without getting into it as well. So half the time I'm like, yeah, I've got all these views, and then I realise that it's because I mentioned like a foot in one of them. So all these foot fetishes watching, I got like an extra 100,000 views from one mention of foot or something, and I'm just like, oh well, is that not validating me in the way I wanted and things? So I think that even though I'm doing it as art, I think you can't help operating these things in the same way as they are being, and that is a detrimental side.
But that's a bit of a regressive approach to representation. It's going back to the old model of almost like a therapeutic tool. You're talking about it as a therapeutic tool rather than another relation to reality. You know, that kind of technology offers something outside of that self-reflection. And I think to return to that moment is missing the point about, I think that everything's being said through this kind of use of this tool then, this medium, which goes far beyond that traditional relation to the image, to reduce it back to a therapeutic tool.
It's not a therapeutic tool because I don't know.
I thought how you described
No,
it
more
was
than, like,
what you wanted
being
it
someone
was
hooked on
to, like the
validation
mirror.
through the internet, like how producing these images has a lot to do with validation, especially for people who are not like, artists and working as it, like a medium. So all the people that are commenting and are like in your work, kind of, they might be doing it in a way that really is like possibly harming them or possibly helping them. But I don't know how to describe it. It's like this kind of validation that we're getting on the internet, and working through that is another way, apart from working through those internet sources, to say the same thing. I don't know. For me, I've been working around like abstinence from the internet and things that could be, I don't know, the opposite of that, like not working with that system to kind of criticize it, because it's kind of, I don't know. I'm just interested.
I mean, you kind of brought up withdrawal as well, and I think, you know, there's also a long history of withdrawal as a kind of feminist tactic of removing yourself from these systems. Because, I mean, there is also that argument, which is like, if these systems are, you know, these infrastructures and institutions are co-opting our identities and commodifying our subjectivity and kind of, you know, then one thing to do is to remove yourself from it and actually not participate. But again, you know, it's a very difficult gesture to make without it having the context of that which you're withdrawing from. And so in that sense, you're always in relation still to that system. And I don't know how you resolve that in your work, but I don't know, it's definitely something I've thought about in my own in terms of that abstinence, but how are you still in relation to it, you know?
I was at Arts in Residence, and they were trying to hook on to the latest trends and things, and one of them was internet abstinence and how they could make money out of people, digital people, how they could make money out of convincing people. And even, I don't know, I'm not supposed to, this is being recorded, no, but I'm sure fine. But they make a lot of other beauty products as well. And one of their things, they were like, well, the next trend is not washing, so how can we make the most money out of that trend? So I think, really, yeah, sometimes I feel you've got to engage with as much exuberance you have. This is why lots of the digital things for me have led to this really physicality, hands-on things with other people, because you can't, it's just a way of, I'm going to get overboard, but just...
It's interesting because, like you said, it becomes sensationalized, and there's women who then own up to the fact that all their images are fake, and they then pull out and it's kind of become a thing, and then loads of other women do it, and it's on Instagram, so it's always given. I just find it really interesting, if anything, just the fact that then it becomes a whole new thing to do. It's like almost a trend.
That's almost like the joke of the digital detox. It kind of only makes sense when there's a book deal at the end of it, or there's an expose, or then you get to write a big blog post all about your digital detox, and that kind of can you escape from it?
I think it is apparently a new and fresh each day, and then you'll get tired of it the next day. So it is scary. It's scary to whether you throw yourself into that or where you position yourself on that sliding scale of being like a.
It's all about positioning, I would suggest.
Particularly when